Hello, my name's Colin Crithers, and I'm a student reporter and broadcaster at the University of Iowa. As a journalist, my job is to tell stories, while also balancing everything else going on in my life as a student. But no one tells our stories. So, my goal is to tell the stories of the student journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers all across the country. Let's walk the student beat. Welcome in. Today we're walking the student beat with Isaac Edelman of Florida. Isaac, how are you today?
How's it going, man? Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for sparing some time to join me here today. So first, if you don't mind introducing a little bit more about yourself and the journalistic outlets you work with.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you for having me on again. And I've kind of done a lot in such a short amount of time. I'm a sophomore at the University of Florida, majoring in journalism, sports, and media. It's actually cool. A lot of schools have sports classes, but not every school has a sports media major where you get to, actually just study sports and nothing else. And that's awesome. So I work with Florida Victorious, which is the NIL collective here with the Florida Gators, do some content with them. I work for WFT News, which is the 5 p.m. student ran news station. And I also do some work with the Orange and Blue Sports Network student radio where I call play-by-play for live Gator events. And I also do Gator Game Day, which is our, Gators football pregame show, which is modeled after, college game day. So I do a lot here, a lot of honor stuff. Love being in front of the camera, and I get to be in front of the camera with you.
Hey, it's the best. It's one of my favorite parts of being in front of the camera is joining everyone for this. And I'm excited to hear more about your guys' pregame show. It's modeled after game day because I also host a co-host with Elise Scan, a pregame football show at Iowa called Before the Kickoff. So I'm excited to hear more about that. But I want to ask you first, what was it that made you realize that sports journalism or just this in general was what you wanted to go into?
No, it's a great question. I'd say that, I loved sports at a young age. I loved speaking. And so my mom had suggested me to go to a sports broadcasting camp called Play-by-Play Sports Broadcasting Camp. And, I kind of went there just because my mom suggested it to me. You know how that works. But because it was about sports and there was things like trivia and different things where people would go even if they're not actually interested in sports broadcasting. So I wouldn't say I was interested in sports broadcasting when I went to the camp, but once I finished my first year at camp, I fell in love with sports broadcasting. I went for 9 years. Now I'm a camp counselor at the broadcasting camp. So that's really what stuck out to me. I played baseball and basketball as a kid, but now I hung up the cleats and I'm attached to a mic now. So that's really, look, I just love speaking. And you want to do a profession that you're good at, but you also want to do something you love. And I've done so much without getting paid a penny for years and years. And I don't complain about it. I don't even think about the money aspect because I just enjoy what I do.
Yeah, what do they say? If you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, right?
Exactly.
What's it like being a camp counselor there now? Like you were there as a
Yeah.
participant, and now you're a counselor. What's that like?
Well, it's weird because the camp is like ages 10 through 18. So there's a huge age gap. So when I started, some of the campers that were campers with me were counselors, and they used to, pick on me because, they know me and they know me when, they were in the same group as me. And now I get to be a counselor for kids that were with me. But it's also cool because a lot of guest speakers, let me name one, for example, the Miami Heat play-by-play broadcaster Eric Reed remembered me from when I was a camper at 10 years old, and now I'm a counselor, and he's still coming back and speaking to the campers. So one of the things I got out of the broadcasting camp, besides making lifelong friends and having fun, is the guest speakers. And when they're done speaking and answering questions, going up to them and getting their email and just being memorable because they won't know you from one time meeting them, but you could try and just being memorable. My personality is memorable, but just getting their contact. Obviously, I'm sure, you've had tons of people on, and I bet you every person you've had on your podcast says that connections are important.
Yeah, connections are huge, especially with this. I remember, I don't know if I told this story on here or not before, but I know an athletic director at Thomas More University. It's a smaller D2 in Northern Kentucky. And when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do out of high school, I started in my parents. I was a headache during that time, but I sat down with him and was like, I want to work in sports, but I don't know if it's going to be this or that. And he's like, the big thing in sports in general, whether it's sports journalism or whatever else, is as long as you have your foot in the door and you know people, you're golden.
Yes.
Like you move around a lot.
Yeah, look, I'm a big believer that it's not the most skilled people that make it. I think it's the most connected. But I will say, if you're connected and skilled, and those two things come together, you are going to make it far in this business. And that's what I've tried to do. And I also have tried to be very multifaceted and well-rounded. I am not the biggest fan of writing, but I've done a ton of writing for a few reasons. Number one, it helps you as a broadcaster, right? You have to write scripts, you have to read scripts. But also, it gets my foot in the door. I'll say this. I've covered two Final Fours by 18, right? And luck is a skill, right? I grew up in Boca. I got to cover FAU. I got to cover FAU when they made it on their magical run to the Final Four. And then my freshman year here at the University of Florida, the Gators won the national championship. So yes, luck has been involved, Colin, but I will say that both of those opportunities where I was credentialed at the Final Four was as a writer. If I was a broadcaster, wouldn't have gotten credentialed because unless you're the guy, unless you're Ian Eagle or Jim Nantz broadcasting the game, you're not getting credentialed. So writing has gotten me the ability to get experience in press conferences and again make connections.
Yeah, that's something I got to get into a little bit more. I am also not by any means a great writer at all, but I gotta say that year that FAU made the Final Four is probably one of the best March Madness like tournaments overall in recent history.
Yeah, no, look, because it wasn't just FAU, it was San Diego State and Miami,
Oh
three teams that you didn't even expect to sniff the Final Four that year.
no, I always remember it was the first round. San Diego State played Charleston, and Pat Kelsey was the head coach at the time. And immediately after the game, he sent out a tweet saying that team is way better than a 5 seed. And what do you know? They went on to the Final Four. But you mentioned two Final Fours by 18, which, first of all, is awesome. Like, that's incredible. But I got to ask, does that mean you did some of this work in high school as well?
Yes, absolutely. I started, I was with my, TV production class, the morning announcements, and I was the editor in chief of my high school newspaper. But that's just covering school sports. I ran my own sports website. I created it during COVID, my freshman year of high school, called FL Teams, where we cover every sports team in the state of Florida. And I created it more as a resume builder and just to have fun, a passion project. And I didn't realize that it could lead to getting into games for free as potential media. And so I ended up covering FAU. And FAU is a smaller school and they love media coverage. So they're not going to deny people even under the age of 18. And again, I got lucky that the year, they made the Final Four, and their head coach Dusty May, who's now at Michigan, knew me. So look, it worked out. But yes, to answer your question, I did a lot of things in high school, covered FAU basketball and FAU football, and I also covered high school football. If you know anything about high school football in South Florida, it is legit. You have 4 and 5 stars. You have future Jeremiah Smiths, future Lamar Jacksons, on the field every Friday night. And so I didn't just cover my high school. I went to West Boca High School, but I covered all the other high schools in the area. So yeah, definitely got more experience than some people get in college. And that's just thanks to my work ethic. Nothing was handed to me. Like obviously being in the morning announcements and being in the school newspaper, that was there. But being my football team's reporter, running my own sports website, getting credentialed to FAU before the age of 18, it was just all of my hard work. And it wasn't like, I necessarily had connections. It's not like my dad worked at a school or whatever. I had to create the connections.
So talk to me a little more about like FL teams or like Florida teams. Are there other people involved in that as well, or is it
Yes,
just you?
absolutely. Yeah, so I wanted to create a site that was unique, and obviously I'm a South Florida sports fan, so I wanted to create a site about South Florida sports, but those things exist. So I said, I don't think there's a site that covers every team in the state of Florida, collegiately and professionally, and that's hard to do. So I have a team of over 30 contributors, a mix of writers, photographers, podcasters, and basically every single person is still older than me. And this is 2025, and I created this during COVID. So getting to manage people that are older than me is a skill not many people get to do. And that has taught me a lot. Like, look, let's say one day I want to manage a company, be a CEO, be a boss. That's a good skill to have, managing. And I obviously had a lot of friends, contribute because, I wasn't paying anybody. So I needed people that were similar to me that just wanted to get into it and have fun. And it's hard to tell your friends that that they need to submit an assignment, that they're late. So learning that is good. But I also worked for and I have to shout them out, a website called New Era Prep. They also covered South Florida sports, and they took me under their belt. And they were the ones who actually got me credentialed to the Final Four. I was working for them, but I also did stuff with my own website, FL Teams. But yeah, a lot of the stuff with FL Teams is me managing and editing articles and running social media rather than, posting stuff myself. I posted stuff myself on New Era Prep.
I think it shows a lot of initiative from you as well, just to get that started and everything. And I think, I mean, it might be pretty obvious. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but getting to college, getting to Florida, how did that kind of set you up in certain ways?
Yeah, so I had a top three, and I'm lucky enough to say I got into my top three schools. I applied to Syracuse. That was my dream school, and when I got in, I was set on it. But being in state, and also I've never seen snow, I just couldn't pass up on Florida. Plus, I was a big baseball guy, and I know Syracuse is the Syracuse Mets, but they didn't have a baseball team. So I said, what better than to stay in state with my good grades? It was $0, no tuition, and great weather, close to home. And Florida's in the SEC, has arguably the best sports teams overall. I'm not just talking about football and basketball. Things like swimming and softball and track and field and tennis were really good. So I ended up applying to Miami, Syracuse, Florida, a bunch of other schools, but Miami, Florida, and Syracuse were my top choices. I ended up picking Florida, and I think it was the best decision I ever made. First of all, the basketball team won a national championship, but I have been able to do so much, and it's still only my fall year of my sophomore year. And I've just been handed opportunities. I've also chased opportunities, but everything is there for me to catch, basically.
That's the, when you say like handed opportunities, though, I know what you mean. I want to clarify in general for those listening that it's always because you chase opportunities and
Yes, yes,
more
yes.
come when you chase more opportunities,
Once I
more
go
come
to
into it.
them, they hand me the opportunity. It's not like they're coming to me.
Exactly. I knew what you meant. I just wanted to clarify for the like again, it's literally about like the more opportunities you chase, the more are going to come at you. It's kind of like the saying of like you get out what you put into it.
And on that note, how did I get to cover the Gators basketball team? Again, I do so many things here. So it's like some events I'm credentialed for this site, some events I'm credentialed for that site. But I came in freshman year. I said to one of the professors, look, I've done so much in high school. I've covered FAU basketball team that made the Final Four. Can I attend a basketball press conference? I'll do whatever. I write an article. I'll do this. There's obviously kids in the journalism school who are assigned to different beats to cover, but I wasn't, right? I was a freshman, fall semester, but they said yes, right? Just because I asked and I was energetic and I showed that I had good experience. I've done it before. I'm no rookie. And they said yes. And, then I was attending every press conference before the season even started. So I covered the basketball team before their national championship run. I guess you could say during, but before we even saw them get one win under their name. So yeah, that was really cool. And then their head coach Todd Golden, now a national championship coach, fell in love with me mainly because I was young and he saw that I was passionate and I asked good questions. And that's a big connection I have now. The head coach of a national championship basketball team, doesn't just know who I am, but is there to help me when I need it.
Yeah, no. Again, it sounds like you made the right choice. You are knocking it out of the park over there. That's so cool that Todd Golden's there and kind of in your corner and everything. Because I mean, that goes on to what I want to ask about it with just covering a national championship and just that game even. Like, what's that like? Does it feel like the stories have such a bigger like hold that much more weight as well?
The coolest thing is the locker room access. During the regular season, you get to talk to the players, but it's all press conference style. They're at the podium, you're sitting in chairs. But the locker room access at the Final Four, at the national championship, is unmatched. And that is really where reporters build their skills, especially as a college student, because you're in a media scrum, nobody's managing it. You have to fight to ask a question, but you're also interviewing the best of the best. Cooper Flag is in the locker room with you. Walter Clayton's in the locker room with you. And then you're walking down the hallway and you see Charles Barkley and Ernie Johnson and Jim Nance and Victor Wembanyama and Carmelo Anthony and Dwayne Wade. Like, it goes on and on. So the locker room access, I think, is the best part. And I love doing one-on-one interviews. I got tons of those in the locker room access. But in terms of the game itself, it's weird, right? I am a college student, and I was in high school when I was covering FAU. And I just took it all in and I was amazed by everything that was going on around me. But then I looked to the side and these people are working really hard. These adults, this is their job. They need to take it seriously. They need to get quotes. They need to put out content as soon as the buzzer sounds because they're getting paid for it. And then I'm there, not saying I didn't work hard because I worked really hard, but I'm like taking it all in and enjoying it. And it's a totally different stress level because I'm taking in as a student and using that experience to get better. Where the people around me are doing this because this is their job. And that just told me that this is what I want to do because I didn't think of it as a job. I was enjoying it. I was having so much fun. And while having fun, I put out the best content I could have put out. So this just told me, this goes back to when you asked me, how did you know you wanted to get into this? Because it's fun. And what do they say? What they say, and I don't know if I believe it, but they say, if you have fun, you don't work a day in your life. You're still working, but you get what they mean.
Exactly. There's still definitely days that feel like work too, 100%. But no, I was one because you kind of started to bring it up there. Is again, we are still young in this. We are college students, and like we grew up fans of sports. We played sports growing up. When you're in that environment, you're seeing Charles Barkley, who's there at halftime, like doing the shows at halftime. You're seeing some of the best players in the entire country. As a student, how do you balance being a professional, being one of the other guys in the room, but also having that little bit of a fandom almost still like burning inside you?
That's a really good question because you have all kinds of student reporters on your podcast. And what's the first word? Students. You are a student. I'm a student. I go to the University of Florida. Of course, I'm allowed to be a fan of the Florida Gators. But when I have that credential on me, I am taking away my fandom. And again, this is part of what helped me at such a young age, being a high schooler covering FAU. I quickly got experience being in a press conference, doing different things, writing game recaps, being in a professional environment. So what did I get out of it? Learning to put away the fandom because I was an FAU fan and for them to make the tournament, I was going crazy. But when I was media, I kept my professionalism and most importantly, you know, every experience builds on each other, right? So, years ago, I would find it crazy to meet Giancarlo Stanton or Dwayne Wade. But now because I've met so many stars, I've kind of gotten humbled in a way where it's like not saying it's not cool anymore, but I'm not freaking out. And again, knowing Todd Golden, the national championship head coach, knowing, Billy Napier just got fired, but Billy Napier, I got to connect with. Like knowing all of these guys, it makes it easier when you know the next guy. And it's just a good example of experiences prepare you for and set you up for who you are and who you will be, right? Because once you have one experience under your belt, it doesn't matter what happens. That experience is under your belt. And so I would just answer that. That was a long-winded answer, but just to answer your question, just meeting so many celebrities and athletes made me more professional.
No, I completely agree with that. Even just at like the college level, like I work over the summers, the past few years, I worked as a ball boy for the Cincinnati Reds. I'm a big
Nice.
baseball fan. So in that sense, I'm meeting a lot of like the baseball players and head coaches and everything. And so like it's not just like but like not just like here at Iowa that I'm meeting some of the athletes or coaches, but I've done that at like the major league level as well. And you do realize like more you meet people and it's just like it just makes them more human. Like I think it, once you're when you're a kid, you look up and they're superhumans for a little bit, and you realize they're just the same as you, and
Mhm.
they just happen to be really, really good at one specific thing that they're doing.
I know you stole my thunder. No, it's your thunder. It's your podcast. I was gonna say that same thing because you just got to treat these guys like they're guys, right? Treat them like humans because they'll appreciate it and they'll give you better quotes and they'll treat you better as well. Look, Walter Clayton is, one of the best college basketball players in Gators history, and now he's on the Utah Jazz and he's a national champion. And I had covered him all season. And, I had asked him questions and talked to him, but we never formally met. And I go into the Final Four locker room. I'm done interviewing him, and he's like, "Appreciate you, Isaac." He knew my name, and I had never knew he knew my name. I assume he didn't because he's Walter Clayton. Why would he know my name? And so it just tells you that, you can get to know these athletes as humans, not as athletes, and they'll respect that a lot.
I think that's one of the cool parts about being able to tell a lot of the stories in sports. Yeah, there's game recaps, and I want to tell the story about what's going on, like the length of the season at one point, like where are we at this point of the year with whatever team, but also telling like those feature stories about athletes and like realize, yeah, it's more than what they are on the court or on the field. There's so much more around them.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And again, at the end of the day, you're a student reporter and they know your students. And that's why, to anyone watching, my advice would be utilize your youth. When I met Ernie Johnson in the hallway in the 2023 Final Four when I was covering FAU, he wanted to speak to me because I was young. If an adult comes up to him, I'm not saying he would be rude because Ernie Johnson is one of the nicest people on the planet, but Ernie Johnson would want to speak to me rather than somebody else just because I'm young. And if I'm able to talk to him in the hallway, I must be there for a reason. I must be credentialed. So use your youth while you're young and use it to your advantage. People will want to help you because you're young, because you're eager to get started, right? So, you know, the next day you're older. There's no denying that. You get older every single day. So while you're young, use that to your advantage. Reach out to people. You could take no for an answer, but don't be afraid to reach out, even if you know the answer is going to be no.
Exactly. Take advantage of every opportunity while you can. I gotta ask you on just for fun, from your unbiased opinion, do you think Florida has got another natty run under their belt for men's basketball?
It's a real tough question, and that's what makes March Madness so good, right? Because upsets happen. Upsets happen. Look at Duke. I'll be the first to admit it. Duke and Auburn had better rosters than Florida. But why did
Mm,
Florida win it all? Because they had the clutch factor, they had a lot of depth, and most importantly, they were well coached and had a will to win. I could guarantee you that the Gators will be a 1 or 2 seed in their region
mhm.
heading into the tournament this year, but I cannot guarantee a national championship because that's what makes March Madness so good. The best teams usually don't win it all.
No, I love March Madness, and I like my birthday is during typically first and second rounds
Okay.
of March Madness, so it's so much fun to just sit there. My whole plan is just I'm watching college basketball all day. I'm setting up as many TVs. I'm writing whatever I can. Oh my March Madness is it's got to be one of the best tournaments. And I don't know your opinion on it. Do you hope or not hope they expand the tournament?
No, I like it the way it is. I think, I don't hear complaints, so I don't know why they would change it. There's leagues where there's complaints and then there's no changes. So I would hate to see changes made when there's no complaints. 68 teams, 64, whatever it is already a lot. And I just think that this is the best playoff format. So no need to change it.
I think it's perfect. I do. I agree with you. I like that you said that. It's like the other part too is sure 68 can be like a lot, but it still have to earn that spot. I remember specifically, I'll talk about Iowa since I can talk about them with a little bit more authority than some other teams, I guess. They were kind of on the bubble, on the out, very far outside bubble last year. There's no reason for them to ever have even had a shot of making the like March Madness last year because they just didn't win enough,
Yeah.
and they would have pretty simply got in last, like if the tournament got expanded, like if last year it was 76 teams or whatever, they would have gotten in, and that should not have happened. It's like that probably should not have been the case. So I look at that and I think 100% keep it to 68.
Yeah, no, look, I've been lucky. I'm a big baseball guy. I'm a big baseball guy, but you know, the college basketball stuff has fallen in my shoes just because of the teams I've covered and how far they've made it. And that goes back to what I was saying. I think luck's a skill. Like you could be more luckier than the person next to you because of where you're standing, and you choose to stand in the place you're standing. I chose Florida over Syracuse and Miami, right? So while I got lucky that Florida won the national championship, Florida could have won the national championship while I was at Syracuse. And so my choice of Florida is a perfect example of why luck is a skill.
Yeah, it pretty much it really is. It really is. And I mean college baseball, you mentioned baseball. College baseball's down there is pretty good as well. I mean, Florida baseball is they're year in year out so good. Like what's it like just having from an Iowa perspective, what's it like having more home games in college baseball? You guys don't have to fly away every weekend to play.
Yeah, look, all of the sports are legit. This is what the SEC is. The Florida Gators are on everything school. And it's cool from a student media perspective because you could be given the bad teams, like track and field or tennis. But those are amazing teams with Olympic athletes. And look, when I covered high school sports, I would go crazy when I get to cover a 4 or 5 star. Well, every guy on the Gators, every woman on the Gators is probably a 4 or 5 star, and
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. So if you put it into that perspective, if you think about it that way, you know, I'm just lucky enough to be around all of these elite athletes. Even just walking on campus in class, that there's elite athletes, sitting right next to me, doing the same homework assignments. So it's really cool. As good as football and basketball are, there's so much more here at the University of Florida.
No, there's so much to look at and it really is an everything school. I mean, I don't think you can understate that. Football's in a weird state right now because I know you guys just fired Billy Napier. Um, which that was in I don't know. It's a really weird year at the swamp, but I've always been curious about the environment down there. I assume it's got to feel like one of the best in the country.
Yeah, look, I haven't been to that many college, big college football venues. Obviously, been to FAU, Miami, Syracuse, but um, it's the swamp, and it is loud, game in, game out, and the home field advantage in college football is a big deal, and that's why a lot of people actually like college football over the NFL because the crowd is just on a totally different wavelength than the NFL. But yeah, the swamp's amazing. That's look, Ben Hill Griffith Stadium has been around for a while. It's the place where Tim Tebow, the best college football player of all time, in my opinion, made his waves and impacted, all of college football.
No, Tim Tebow probably is. I remember like this week actually when we are recording this, Mark Gronowski, the current quarterback for Iowa. Not that he's even anywhere close to Tim Tebow, but they compared his running. Like the coaches are comparing his running game to Tim Tebow, and I'm like, let's not get overzealous about everything, but I mean that's pretty cool because he's probably the best quarterback Iowa's had in the Kirk Ferentz era. But you mentioned about like a pregame, I'm going to say this for lack of better terms, a pregame football show modeled after college game day. How so? Like, how's it modeled after it?
Yeah, so to have a student run show, right, completely the student talent and student production, um, where we preview, the Gators football game outside of the journalism school, outside of the stadium. The journalism school, if you know anything about UF, is right next to the football stadium.
Oh, it's fun.
And the idea is to have an entertaining show that looks good on your reel, right? That you could say, hey, no other person in the country is doing a pregame show with this much production going into it, right? So a lot of schools do pregame shows, obviously, but the set is legit, and there are a lot of production things that go into it. Things like VOs, things like graphics, and different segments. And we model it after ESPN's College Game Day in terms of, you make your predictions, you preview the game, but you also have a fun segment that's going to be able to show your personality and provide the entertainment that people look for.
What do you guys change up what that fun segment is each week?
Well, yeah, it's funny. The professor asks every class, and we love it so much. And it's a big class, so there's a rotation of people on each week. Everybody does different roles, so everybody wants their fair share of that segment. We call it chomped or swamped, and it's chomp this take or swamp the take. So if you agree with the take, you chomp it, and if you disagree, you would swamp it.
That's so much fun. Do you have like a favorite moment in that segment? Like maybe a favorite take in that segment?
Oh, that's a that's a tough question. I feel
Not to
like
throw
my
you on the spot, but
no, that's okay. My takes. Look, I'm a broadcaster. I love being put on the spot. My takes, I like to have some wild takes. I don't think any of them have hit, so it's not fair for me to name any of those. Oh, I guess I could name the obvious, that they asked if the Gators were going to have an undefeated season. And I said no, and we
Uh,
are far away from an undefeated season. So yeah, I was right.
chomped is good, right? Chomped and
Yes,
slump.
yes, correct.
So that'd be chomped. That'd be chomped.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
there you go. There you go. I like that. I think that's fun. Like we've again, I was saying like before the kickoff is our pregame show, and we try some other stuff as well. Like we have a segment, like a game show segment, and each week we're playing a different like game, but it's supposed to somehow relate to like what's going on this week. So I remember one week Kirk Ferentz was going to break the Big Ten record for like most wins by a head coach. So that week it was like I don't know, it was pretty much just game of pure luck. Like just a bunch of cups on a table, and underneath them was like a significant win in Kirk Ferentz's career. And however, like let's just say it was win number 100, that person got 100 points. Whoever had the most points at the end won the game that
Mhm.
week. So we try a few things like that, which I think is fun. Um, I don't know. We gotta figure out some more games to play. We every week we're sitting there trying to find a new one, and then
Yeah.
it'll be Elise and I. We'll look at each other and go, do you have an idea for a game this week? No, and we figure it out. We figure it out. We figure it out.
And I'll say this about the Gator Game Day show we do. We meet more than once a week, but we have a class every Monday morning. And I love the class because it's literally just sports talk. The class is reviewing, the last show, right? Critiquing it so the whole class can hear, even if they're not being critiqued, if they're not on the set. But then the second half of the class is prepping for the next show, and it's basically just football talk. Everybody's talking, and I always say, save it for the show, save it for the show, because everybody's having such good conversations. I'm like, this would be perfect for on air. And so it becomes like a football podcast, just behind closed doors, and everybody's talking and coming up with podcast ideas. And it's a lot of hard work. Like, not every week you're the analyst or the host on the desk. Some weeks you're a rover. And if the game's at 3:30, you got to show up at 9 a.m. You got to set up the tent, the set, all the wires, and you're staying there until the show is done, which is right before the game. So if the game's at 3:30, 3 o'clock, and you're not getting any tape, you're just sitting there, but you're there to help. And that's what life is. That's what a job is. You might be waiting at CBS Sports or ESPN, and your job might be to get somebody water or food if they need it, and that's your only job. So it's cool because all the hard work you put in pays off. And like I'm getting great tape for my reel, and thanks to the production because I could set up a Zoom like we are and just start talking into the camera, into the computer. And hey, the Gators are gonna win tonight. I think they're gonna win because of blah blah blah. But the production makes it so much better.
It is all about the production that goes into some of those shows. So when you say that though, like right before the game, is it a so you guys do it on Saturdays, right?
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Is it a live taping of it?
Yes. Yep. Live.
Okay, that's awesome. Actually, it's like ours is
I
is
tell it modeled after college game day. College game day
that
is
is
live. So
there it
yeah,
is. There it is. Okay, that is awesome. So I assume like you have the full week to do like production and everything, which probably helps a lot.
yes, like the people that aren't on are going to be tasked with you know putting together VOs, right? So if I'm an analyst and I'm talking about DJ Lagway's inconsistencies, I'm gonna talk over, I'm gonna voice over video of him making a bad throw or bad read or bad pocket presence. And so the whole team comes together. And again, as I've told you, I've done so much sports media stuff, but until this year was the first time I put on an IFB in my ear hearing production. So I've claimed I've done a lot at such a young age, but until this fall semester, I've put a IFB in my ear where I'm actually listening to production. So, you have to keep on elevating. That's the key word. You got to keep on elevating. So I didn't know what an IFB was until this year. So obviously, I'm taking steps up.
That's the thing. We're still students, though. There's still something you learn something new every day. You learn something
Yeah.
new every day. There's all it's the same thing in sports. I always love the phrase of just when you think you've seen it all. You hear that on a game after something crazy happens, and it's the same thing with what we're doing. I think there's still like again, I'm in my junior year right now. Plenty of stuff that I still am learning, am still trying, and like okay, let me try this the next time I tell this story, the next broadcast I'm on. Let me try to work this in and see if it's comfortable. So
Look, yeah, well, doing this is already, getting off to a good start. During COVID, I used my free time to interview, broadcasters. Why? Because I wanted to learn more about them. I wanted to post content. But most importantly, like, look, we didn't know each other before you reached out to me to do this. Now we know each other. So again, this goes back to the beginning of our show, connections. Having somebody for an interview is more than the interview, more than the content that you're able to post. They now know who you are because you talk to them for 30, 40 minutes.
and I'm very glad about that. I'm glad to know who you are and everything. This is for I interrupt my whole thing. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I want to ask one of the cores of this. Obviously, you mentioned like the beginning of it. You're a student. It's a student journalist. So like the and I'm forgetting the name like your guys' pregame show modeled off College Game Day. There's a class every Monday. So you have
Mhm.
classes that are related to what you're doing, but also you have other classes in general. You're balancing classes
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
all your work in general. How do you best balance those two worlds?
Yeah, it's a great question. I sometimes forget I have classes because I'm doing so many things that are not classes. We call them immersion experiences. Think of it like an internship or shadowing. Immersion experiences, you get credits, you get class credits, but they're the things outside of class, outside of school. Gator Game Day, right, is an immersion experience. The Orange and Blue Sports Network, which is the student radio play-by-play, is an immersion experience. The 5 p.m. sports segment I do, on the student news is an immersion experience. Those are not classes. Classes are like, teaching you how to be a writer, teaching you how to broadcast right, teaching you how to make packages like TV sports reporting. And I sometimes forget I go to classes, but luckily enough, my freshman year, I finished all of my non-journalism classes because, again, I'm in state. I came in with a lot of, college credit from high school. So, yeah, look, luckily, I'm, really focused on journalism now, where I don't have to take any like math or history classes.
Doesn't it feel so much better to be at that point too? Like just to have classes that are focused on what you want it to be focused on.
Yeah, and look, like I think the biggest difference between like journalism and everything else is like if you're done with class in the business school, you're going home. In the journalism school, you're going to the newsroom and you're just talking sports with people and just hanging out around them. So it's fun. Like I always use the newsroom as a library. It's not quiet. I can multitask, but I just like being around people. I'm a people's person, you know?
That's what I'm doing right now. I got out of class at this point that like what it is right now about 2 hours ago, and I had like an hour in between class being done and hopping on this call with you. So and I'm just in our TV studio right now, which I was telling you earlier. So I agree. I feel that completely. Every time I'm done with class, I typically like we'll have people just pass through, and I'll be sitting there like, oh, you're just like waiting in between classes, and sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no, I'm going to class right now. I just wanted to see if anyone was here and say hi.
Yeah. No, it's same way. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the fun part about like student journalism and journalism in general is just the atmosphere, the people it is a tight knit community. It is a community that like loves to build each other up, and I think that's kind of to your point that you were saying earlier of the people want to help because you're young. Well, everyone, I would hope everyone wants to help each other in this as well because it does take a lot of work. It is difficult. I mean, I'm sure you know with all the things that you're doing, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, like, I think I'm really good at time managing. I love going from event to event. I
Yeah.
love being kept busy. I'm not the type of guy that wants to relax or have a second to breathe. I love going from the Gator Game Day show, for example, which I says finishes 30 minutes before game, right to broadcasting the game, for Orange and Blue Sports Network. So you just got to manage your time well. But like I always say, you could create time for things. Like the people that are busy, I believe them. They are busy, but they're busy because they're not managing their time correctly. And look, the more you could do, the better. Look, I'm doing so much. I'm almost, you know, conflicting into some things, right? Because I'm doing Gator Game, the Orange and Blue Sports Network, and I'm with Florida Victorious, which is the NIL collective. But the more you do, the better. Again, being well-rounded. So yeah.
If you can manage it all, then why not? I completely agree with like exactly what you just said there. I like going from event to event, and I know that like I was talking to someone yesterday, and I was saying like when you start off doing things, obviously you start with like one thing and you add more and more. And at first you're like, oh, I wonder how much I can like I wonder how I can handle this or how much I can handle. And I think you realize the more you add, the more you can actually handle, no matter like what you believe about yourself. I think you realize you can handle so much more.
You have to do what's best for you, right? Like, I can't tell everybody, to do as much as possible. Don't let somebody tell you you're doing too much, because some people that are trying to tell you that you're doing too much, or they mean it. Like,
Mhm.
they're concerned for you. But you got to do what's best for you. And for me, I love being busy. I ask for more. Feed me, feed me, feed me. So, if that's the mentality you have, you're going to make it far in this business, because you're going to be fine if your boss tells you, hey, you got to stay an extra hour because you got to do this story, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, nail on the head right there. Nail on the head with that exactly. And you brought it up, and I just want to clarify. Um, so like your 5 p.m. newscast, Orange and Blue Radio, like Gator Game Day, those are all you get credit for school for all those.
Yes.
That's pretty nice. I gotta admit, that is pretty nice. I know all my stuff, we don't get credit, but like we do get a little bit of like a stipend instead. So it goes down as like, for example, like DITV, it's the studio I'm in right now, is like the student television station, but like it's not attached to the journalism school. It's its own separate thing. So it goes down as like a job by itself, which I would admit now though, it would be pretty nice to get some credit for that. I gotta imagine that kind of saves a little bit of time, or feels pretty good to get school credit on that.
Well, I'm doing so much that I need to stop getting credits because I'm gonna max out. So
You're right. You're like right there. You're gonna graduate too early. I don't know. You can't graduate too early, I guess, but you want to get as much out of college as you can.
yeah, you're right. I don't know if there's such thing as well, yeah, no, there is such thing as graduating too early, I guess, because you could always take advantage of more experiences, right? Like if I finish, all my classes and get degrees, there's still stuff for me to do here because of these immersion experiences.
Yeah, exactly. There's I mean, just think about like the ways sports go in college. Like there's fall sports, there's winter sports, and there's spring sports, and you get experiences out of all of those all year long. And I don't know. I just think that part is cool. I think that part's fun.
Yeah.
And just again off like the idea of being like a student journalist, there is that extra word in there, student. And some people when they're looking for stories and they're trying to learn more about like whatever Gator football, Gator basketball, Gator baseball, they might go they're just if you were to tell someone outside of what we do about why it's important to pay attention to student journalism and student stories, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say students work as hard as people in the industry, if not harder, because most of us are not getting paid. And we're doing the exact same thing. Not saying we do as good of a job, right? There's a reason, you know, the people in the industry have done it for way longer than us, right? But you should care about what we do and read what we put out and listen to what we put out, because we are students. We have a different angle. We grew up in a different way than older people have. Not even just from a social media perspective, just everybody has different experiences. And also I would say, look, obviously some students are credible, some students are not, but you could take away the student name. Just like freshmen in college, freshman football players. Some freshmen play like seniors, right? Some freshmen go straight to the draft after their freshman year. So I would say it works the same way with student reporters. Just because they're called student reporters doesn't mean they're not regular reporters.
Exactly. Just because exactly what you said there right at the end. Student reporters can be regular reporters as well. I mean, we are regular reporters. It's just that they have that extra little term on there as well. I like that you said that there at the end. And if you think about again, like we mentioned, like you're doing a lot, and
Yeah.
everything that you're doing right now, you've been to a couple of Final Fours, you've seen a national championship, Gator football, Gator baseball, and just Florida athletics period, and then everything you did in high school. if you had a chance to go back and tell yourself back in COVID when you're first starting FL teams that this is where you're at right now, this is what you're doing, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell that's a good question. I would tell myself that I'm doing what I thought I would do. I thought you were going to ask me, did I have any regrets? No, no, no. I think I'm doing exactly, what people would expect out of me, not just myself. I've always been the guy to get my foot in the door. I'm not shy to ask anybody any question. I'm not shy to go up to somebody that I never met and introduce myself. And so I just continue to build connections. I continue to build experiences. And most importantly, I continue to make people smile. I always say when I walk into the room, I bring a bright light, not just a light. But no, it's funny you asked that because, when I was in high school, I got lucky. My freshman and sophomore year, my high school football team had 1 win combined. And then the next 2 years, we had 14 wins combined. We hired a new coach. The coach brought in some star players, a Miami commit, a Louisville commit, whatever. And so that is again an example of luck as a skill. And so then I got to cover top football players week in, week out, and be around them in the classroom. So look, if I were to go back and tell myself, I would definitely be proud of where I am right now. And I'm always a big believer in believing in my gut, right? Trusting my decisions. And I trusted my decision to go to the University of Florida. And so that is the big thing. When I look back, I really wanted to go to Syracuse, and $90,000 versus $0 is a big difference. And I'm a big believer wherever you go, whatever college you go to, you can make the most out of it. You can create opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, trust your gut. It's a big thing in journalism as well. When you're writing a story, you're telling a story, you're on a broadcast, it's just going with your first instinct. And that might come across as best as possible, especially when you get more reps under your belt. But you mentioned we mentioned earlier about how networking is so big in this, and knowing people is great. So a chance now for more people to get to know you, and a chance to plug a little bit of your work, places that people can find what you do after they listen to this episode.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You could find me on Twitter at Isaac Edelman, on Instagram at Edelman Isaac. My sports website, flteams.com. You don't see my name on there much, but I'm the guy behind it. I'm the guy approving every one of those articles. And you could also check me out on LinkedIn, and that you'll see like all of the work things I do. And I feel like on a podcast like this, LinkedIn is a good mention.
Absolutely. I will make sure to link everything as well. Anything that you want linked down there, I got you on that. But thank you for sparing some time here on the Student Beat. It was a pleasure having you on.
No, thanks so much for having me on. And I really, again, want to thank you for not just having me on, but doing this podcast. I think it'll inspire, the future generation of sports media professionals.
Thank you so much. I do really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Student Beat. As you can tell from this, Isaac is doing a lot of incredible stuff, and if you're not following along with him, then you're just missing out. So you're going to want to make sure you check out all of his work. And if you want to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes, make sure to follow me on Twitter at C_Crothers33, or you can follow the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at The Student Beat. We just walked The Student Beat. I'll see you next week for a brand new episode.